For training the crew for the International Space Station, we incurred quite a number of challenges that I'm sure the exploration teams would also like to keep in mind. Starting off, when we had 4 crews in training, we decided that we would train each individual crew member to accomplish any activity that they could possibly be asked to do on board the space station. This is both for the US segment and the Russian segment. So we did not start off with a concept of segmented operations in the training area. This resulted in about a 4-year training flow for the initial crews. Part of that was based on the content, and part of that was based to delays in the launch of the first element and the launch of the first crew. But other complicating factors were, at that phase of the game, we didn't have all of our ducks in a row with respect to the true ops concept. So rather than zeroing in on a particular ops concept, we tried to best prepare them for whatever the ops concept might be, thinking that after a few months of flying on orbit, we would figure that out and be able to skinny the content down. After about the first 4 crews, we had a chance to really understand what it was that the crews were responsible for on orbit versus what the ground was responsible for. This caused us to reassess the initial training concept that we had, where the crew would be able to do everything. As a result of this analysis, we defined 3 categories of training: the operator training, specialist training, and user training. The operator would be responsible for performing all nominal tasks, and these nominal tasks were now defined as crew hands-on tasks, because the ground was now responsible for performing the nominal onboard maintenance of the systems. In addition, the operator training was also provided to allow the crew to respond to off-nominal situations that required either an immediate response, like an emergency fire depress, or that required a quick enough response that there would be no time to communicate with the ground. For example, if there was a problem with one of our solar arrays. For the specialist training, that was everything else. So things that you would only do every once in a while if something broke, or that would require an in-depth knowledge of the system before performing. The user training was a category that we created to help reduce the flow. And for example, in segmented operations, a U.S. crew member did not need to have an in-depth knowledge of some of the Russian systems. They were only going to be potentially a user of that system. For example, the U.S. galley or the U.S. portable water dispenser, if that failed, the crew member would need to be able to use the equivalent piece of hardware on the Russian side. So they would get user-level training on that particular piece of hardware. As a result of that assessment, we were able to reduce that initial 4-year training flow down to a duration of about 24 to 30 months. So that was a great accomplishment on our parts, and great lessons learned as we were still executing ISS. And not to be satisfied with that, we are currently assessing whether or not we can reduce that flow even further. The specialist concept that I mentioned before, after now years of operation and understanding how the systems failed and the immediacy of having to respond to that, combined with the fact that the ISS is so large now. So the amount of information that would be required for a specialist far exceeds the brain capacity to be able to retain that knowledge. So acknowledging that fact, we are looking at doing things like reducing or eliminating certain specialist flows altogether that would help us get to around a 15-month flow. In addition, the way we have handled some of that, because the crew had forgotten some of that knowledge, is we create dedicated packets of review information that we would send up to the crew prior to executing a specialist type task. This would include PowerPoint presentations and videos and things of that nature, as if you were sitting in a classroom environment down on the ground, except they would be performing that training on orbit. So we call this just-in-time training. And that is a concept that we are now looking at implementing and expanding the use of onboard ISS. And we think it would be a very good starting base for training for exploration as well. Reducing the training template not only reduces the amount of time and money that is spent in preparing these crews, but also has benefits from the crew's psychological perspective. Imagine yourself being on the ground for 4 years, training day in and day out to execute a mission that is significantly shorter in duration. Time away from family, time away from home. We need to be able to minimize that for the crews and take advantage of modern technology to allow them to have more time with their families.